Just a little bit of Gloomhaven. So earlier we had a little situation back some time ago. I did a video on a little bit of a tech rant on how crappy technology is these days, like hard drives, for instance. They just don't make them to last. You know, always have a backup of a backup of a backup, because, you know, everything is made to break down, right? So, long story short, we started working on the Mine Thief back then, and I had all kinds of video footage on how I put them together, and that's all gone. But Lee's got to show you how he turned out, and maybe some of the colors and stuff I did use, and a lot of it you could probably just piece together yourself, because you've seen me paint these guys before, right? I do all the bases relatively the same, so that way, you know, it kind of has some consistency from character to character in the terrain that they're on. You know, so we're looking at the Mine Thief here. He's like a little rat guy. It's kind of neat looking. I'll give you a list of the paint that I used, and we'll just talk about him a little bit, and that's pretty much her. So let's get down to the Mine Thief. So at least I had some video left, and I can go over some of the coloring that I've done. So starting out here, all I'm doing is just actually adding some regular Citadel white just to bring out his eyes, and I just leave them white because he has kind of like glowing eyes, so it's to make that stand out like that. Now, just to touch on a few things, I've already painted some of his base using that texture that I use from Citadel. That I use for all of the Gloomhaven characters. And I then later on go to do the usual, add some glue, add some thicker chunks of rock, and then a little bit of Army Painter Battlefield Brown Battleground to fill in the back side of the base. And here I'm actually adding a little bit of a Lothern Blue to his like skirt and his back part of his clothing. This says in the picture he has a bit of a blue to him like that, so it's just very lightly brushed on just to give it that accent color that it has. When I add in the shades afterwards, it really kind of dulls it down, and it doesn't stand out nearly as much, but you can still tell that there's at least color there. So something else I did is I also added a little bit of white to a pattern that's on his little dagger there. Right? It kind of glows, and a Runefang Silver, so it kind of matches with the picture. Just to make it shine. Here I'm actually using a werewolf fur from the Army Painter War Paints. And down at the bottom of his right foot there's a little rat or a little mouse right there. And there's also one on his shoulder that I color in as well. And that's where I'm adding. You can see his tail right there. He's kind of an interesting character. Almost as small as the Tinkerer. He's got small details. You know, a little harder to paint just because of how tiny he is. He's got a little bag that hangs on his side right there where his potions are. You know, and the potions I also use afterwards some Ardeoat, right, to bring out those little bottles to make them look shinier. In the bag I use a leather brown from Army Paints, right, just to give it that kind of leather look. And it stands out a little bit more from everything else he wears. I'm just finishing up adding in the fur. I'm really kind of glad at least I had some of the video footage of painting this guy. This was also before I had a better camera for close-up too. Right here, it's not too bad, but right here you can see I'm just adding a little bit of black, you know, just to darken up, you know, in his mouth and around some of the details there. So here now I'm just adding some Agrax Earthshade over his fur to highlight and bring in some of the depth to his fur. You can see it just kind of bring it right out right there. Looks good. Here, I'm just using some Nuln Oil. You can see much blacker there. And that's just to go over his clothing and a few other areas just to kind of darken it up. Because he's kind of a sinister, dark little rat guy from the shadows with glowing eyes and a glowing dagger, right, that controls your mind. Something like that anyway. So I didn't want him to be too bright. Alright, so here we are. Here's our finished little dude. So I think he turned out pretty good. There's those glowing eyes. Kind of cool. And you can see that little bit of focus here. That little bit of that pattern, like kind of in his dagger. It's hard to see with the camera. There's a little pouch and stuff in the back. There's his potions. Come up to a nice shine. I added a little bit of a copper almost to his gold to change it up a little bit, but it actually comes out nice. You know, and then there's the usual rock and battleground. You know, for the same as all the other Gloomhaven characters, and the cracked earth in the front that this stuff does. This stuff's very cool. So overall, I think he turned out pretty good. So there's really only one more basic character from the starting of Gloomhaven, the Spellweaver. We've gotten the Tinkerer, the Cragheart, the Brute, the Scoundrel, and now the Mind Thief. So the only one left is the Spellweaver. However, we have unlocked some new characters. So I may save the Spellweaver for later. I may start painting the ones we're using because we need new paint for new characters because we're already playing them. So we'll see how it goes. But I hope you like at least the video I was able to provide for with little that I have for this guy. But I think he turned out pretty good anyway. So until next week.